Hi everyone, welcome to one of your last big lessons in cells. Today's lesson is called cell transport. So transport meaning moving. We're moving something into and out of the cell. So first of all, we're going to start with just a general definition of transport. It's the movement of materials within an organism, and specifically we're talking about cells. Now, there are two specific types of transport. There's passive and active transport. And before we move on, see if you can take a minute to think about what passive versus active transport might mean. Which one is going to have more movement than the other? Which one is, just take a minute to think about what you might think those mean before I tell you what they mean. Okay, so before I go into passive transport and active transport, I just want to say that the osmosis lab that you started earlier this week is an example of cell transport. And I'm not going to tell you too much because I don't want to spoil the results of the lab. However, I want you to keep this lesson in mind when you're completing your lab because that lab is a perfect example of transport of materials into and out of a cell. And our cell is the egg. So we're watching how things move into and out of the egg. Okay, so passive transport. No energy is required from the cell in passive transport. Substances with passive transport move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So they move from where there's a lot of something to where there's not a lot of something. Diffusion and osmosis are both examples, and the egg lab that we're doing is an osmosis lab. Okay, so I'm going to give you the definition of both osmosis and diffusion. So diffusion is the movement of any material from an area of higher to lower concentration. So an example of diffusion is if you were to spray a perfume or an air spray, like an air freshener spray in the classroom. If I sprayed it and I was sitting at the front lab table, for example, who do you think would smell it first? I hope you guessed tables 1 and 2. Tables 1 and 2 would smell it first because they're closest. So it moves from higher concentration to lower. It's a higher concentration closest to me because that's where I sprayed it. So that's why those people sitting closer to me would smell it first. Osmosis is a type of diffusion. However, it's water moving through a membrane from an area of higher to an area of lower concentration. So water or another type of liquid, like the lab we're using vinegar, corn syrup, and water, moving through a membrane, that membrane being the egg, from an area of higher to lower concentration. So after we finish our lab, we're going to talk about where the areas of high and low concentration were with each type of liquid we used. This is just a little diagram to show you the top rows starting on the left-hand side. As you move over to the right, they become less concentrated. So we're moving from higher to lower concentration over time. Active transport, as its name suggests, does require energy from the cell. It is also movement of materials within the cell, but it's from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration. So it's the opposite of passive transport. Passive, remember, goes from high to low. It's really easy for something that's crammed in to want to move and have more space. But for something that is already got a lot of space, it takes a lot more energy to move it to somewhere that has hardly any space. So those are both types of active transport, or there's something called exocytosis and endocytosis. Some of the particles are actually too big to fit through the pores of the cell membrane, so they can't pass through. So what happens is these are engulfed by the cell membrane and then moved either into or out of the cell. And there's a really short video clip. If you click the yellow link for exocytosis/endocytosis, you can watch it. And then on your graphic organizer, I want you to write just a brief definition of what each of those things is in your own words, as well as what the prefix X means in the prefix N. So X, think of exiting, and N, think of entering. And what is exiting and entering? We're talking about materials moving into and out of the cell. Have a great day.